Good morning, everyone. There are moments that arrive without warning, not announced, not scheduled, not earned in any way that follows a clean, logical sequence. They simply appear in the middle of an ordinary day, in the gap between one breath and the next, and something that was closed begins, almost imperceptibly, to open. This may be one of those moments, not because the universe owes you a dramatic reversal, not because struggle automatically produces reward on a timeline that makes narrative sense, but because there are currents in a life that move beneath the surface of what's visible, and sometimes, without any fanfare, they shift, they align. They carry something toward you that you may not have been expecting, and that may arrive looking nothing like what you imagined and everything like what you needed. So stay here for a moment. Don't scroll past this. Don't dismiss it before it has a chance to land. Because something in you, the part that's still listening, still open, still quietly reaching despite everything, may already sense that what's coming deserves your attention. Let's talk about luck. Not the shallow kind, not the kind that's just random fortune dropping into a passive life. Something more interesting than that, something more layered. Because the people who seem from the outside to be perpetually lucky rarely experience it that way from the inside. From the inside, it often feels less like luck and more like a long, unglamorous accumulation of showing up, of remaining in the game, past the point where it felt reasonable, past the point where most people would have quietly stepped away and chosen something safer. And then something breaks open. Not because they finally did the right thing, not because the universe decided they'd suffered enough and it was time to balance the ledger, but because they were still there, still positioned, still available to receive something that required their presence to land. You may have been doing exactly that without realizing it, without it feeling like strategy or wisdom or anything other than simply not knowing how to stop trying. But staying, even when staying felt like stubbornness, even when it looked from the outside like you weren't moving, may have been placing you slowly and without ceremony exactly where something needs you to be. There's a particular feeling that precedes change. Most people don't recognize it until afterward, until they look back and say, yes, something was different then, even if I couldn't name it. It has a quality of restlessness to it, a low-grade electricity, a sense that the current version of things is somehow provisional, slightly less solid than it was, as if the walls of the ordinary are subtly thinner than usual, and something on the other side is pressing through. You may have been feeling something like that recently. Or maybe it hasn't arrived as a feeling yet. Maybe it's more of an absence, a lightening of something that's been heavy, a faint sense that a door you'd stopped looking for might be somewhere nearby, not visible, not certain, but possible in a way it hasn't felt possible in a while. That shift in possibility is worth paying attention to. Not because it guarantees anything, but because perception tends to precede reality, because the opening of an inner door often comes just before something finds it possible to walk through. What would it mean for you specifically if something broke in your favor? Sit with that question for a moment. Not the generic version, not the abstract sense of things getting better, the specific version, the one that lives in the particular texture of your own life, your own circumstances, your own private ledger of what's been withheld and what you've been quietly, persistently hoping for. There may be something that comes to mind immediately. something that's been on the edge of your awareness for a long time, not always at the front, but never entirely gone. A circumstance that needs to shift, a door that needs to open, a form of relief or recognition or resource or connection that would change the particular texture of your days in ways that are hard to fully articulate but immediately felt. That thing, whatever it is, may be closer than the current view suggests. Not as a promise, but as a possibility that deserves more room in your interior life than doubt has been giving it. Because doubt is loud and habitual and very good at making itself sound like realism. And sometimes what sounds like realism is simply a very well-worn story, a story that feels true because it's been told so many times, not because it's the only version of events available. There are things that may have been quietly arranging themselves in the background of your life. In the unseen machinery of circumstance, the decisions other people are making that you have no knowledge of, the connections forming between elements of your situation that aren't yet visible from where you stand, the slow turning of variables that haven't yet resolved into anything you can point to. Timing is a strange thing. It rarely feels like it's working in your favor while it's happening. It feels more often like delay, like obstruction, like evidence that things aren't moving, when in fact they may be moving in ways that require a certain amount of invisible assembly before they can show themselves. Like a puzzle being put together in a room you can't enter yet, and the door will open when enough pieces are in place. It's possible that more pieces are in place than you know. That what has felt like waiting has also been, in some concurrent and invisible sense, a preparation, a clearing, a making room for something that requires a version of you and a version of your circumstances that didn't exist before this particular stretch of time did what it did to you. Let's talk about what you've built without realizing you were building anything. Because that's often how the most important inner work happens, not deliberately, not with a plan, but as a byproduct of simply living through something, of sitting with discomfort long enough that it stops being able to scare you the way it used to, of discovering through the experience of difficult things that you are more capable of enduring than you gave yourself credit for, is less than #0. 5 hash is greater than. That's a form of wealth. Not the visible kind, not the kind that shows up on any ledger, but the kind that changes what you're able to receive, because receiving something significant requires a certain capacity, a certain groundedness, a certain inner stability that can't be borrowed or performed. It has to be built, and it tends to get built quietly and without your permission in exactly the kinds of seasons you've been living through. You may be more prepared than you feel. That's worth sitting with. The feeling of preparation and the reality of preparation don't always arrive at the same time. Sometimes the readiness is already there, already assembled, already present before the feeling of readiness has caught up. And something that's been approaching your life may have been waiting in some sense for exactly that, for the readiness underneath the doubt to reach a particular threshold. Here is what luck may actually look like when it arrives. Not necessarily a single dramatic event, not always a lightning bolt moment with clear before and after edges. Sometimes it looks like a conversation that opens something, a decision that feels small in the moment but turns out to be load bearing, an offer, an encounter, a coincidence that only reveals its significance in retrospect when you look back and trace the line from where you are to where you were and see that it passed through that ordinary moment, that unremarkable Tuesday, that chance exchange that didn't feel like anything at the time. That's the quality of what may be approaching, something that requires your eyes to be open, your attention to be available, your willingness to recognize possibility when it arrives in forms that don't announce themselves, that don't look from the outside like the jackpot you've been imagining, but that carry embedded in their texture exactly the shift you've been needing. Don't be so focused on what you expected that you miss what's actually arriving. That may be the most important thing I can offer you right now, because good things have a way of coming in shapes we didn't specify, in doors we didn't know we were standing in front of, in openings we might have walked past if we were only looking for the version we'd already imagined. You are luckier than you currently feel. That's not a dismissal of what's been hard. It's not a suggestion that difficulty was secretly fortune in disguise, or that everything happens for a reason, or any of the other comfortable phrases that sometimes get placed over real pain, like a bandage over something that needs more than a bandage. It's something more specific than that. It's the observation that you are still here, still in motion, still carrying within you the particular combination of experiences and capacities and quiet knowing that make up the specific person you are, and that person in this specific moment may be standing at an intersection that doesn't look like much from where you're standing, but that could, from a wider angle, look like exactly the right place to be. Something may be about to find you here. Not because you've done everything right, not because you've waited long enough or suffered enough or finally learned the lesson, just because you're here, still present, still available, still underneath the fatigue and the doubt and the carefully managed expectations, open enough for something to land. Get ready. Not with urgency, not with grasping, with the quiet readiness of someone who has learned through everything that they can handle what comes, and something may be coming that's worth being ready for.